Get started.
Call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. We're
Good
gonna
evening.
do roll call
Mrs. Petropoulos, absent. Mrs. Abundant,
here.
Mrs. Lamb, absent. Mrs. Grove,
Here.
Mrs. Birkin, here. Mr. Medina,
Here.
and Mrs. Schroeder.
Here. Let's stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes.
Yeah, introduction of guests.
So we'd like to welcome back our admin team, who unless it was Megan, everyone else got to have July off, which is very, very well deserved. And so wanted to welcome them back. We have been together since about 7:55 this morning in various meetings. So it's very right in your face. Welcome back. But I would also like to congratulate and embarrass Dr. Katie King, who just defended her dissertation last week and is officially now a doctor. So I know that takes a lot of work and really excited for everything you learned to continue to bring that to our district. So congratulations. We also have our newest CREA co-presidents. We have Bonnie Kunzer and Julie Baker. So would like to welcome them to their first official meeting as co-presidents. So we're glad that you're here. And finally on the list, we have Maria Grossi, who is the business manager over at the Eisenhower Cooperative. So thank you for being here. All right. Before we move on, Tirza is not here. She is our secretary. So we do need to elect a secretary pro temp. So do we have anyone who would like to make a nomination for that?
Nominate Joanne.
Okay.
Hey, Mrs. Birkin. Aye. Mrs. Schroeder. Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
and Mrs. Levesque.
Aye. Okay, 2.0 Eisenhower Cooperative.
Yeah, we have the annual budget hearing for the Eisenhower Cooperative. The Eisenhower Cooperative is made up of all the districts except one that feed into School District 218. And so it is a cooperative that comes together to provide special education services for all of those buildings. And since the very inception of the cooperative, as far as I know, we have kind of been the placeholder for the finances. It has to run through a school district, and that has just always been Chicago Ridge. So we just, as a board, need to officially approve that document so that we have a budget. And Maria from the co-op is here to answer any questions.
Okay, so 2.1 annual budget hearing for Eisenhower Co-op. I'm opening the hearing at 6:36 p.m. Is there anyone who would like to address the board regarding the Eisenhower Cooperative budget for fiscal year 24? I ask again, is there anyone who would like to address the board regarding the Eisenhower Cooperative fiscal year 24 budget? Final request, is there anyone who would like to address the board regarding the FY 24 Eisenhower Cooperative budget? Hearing is now closed at 6:37. Okay, potential board action to approve the Eisenhower Cooperative FY 24 budget. Can I get a motion, please? I'll make a motion.
I'll second. Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Birkin. Aye. Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder. Aye. And Mrs. Levesque.
Aye. 3.0 approval of the consent agenda. Minutes from June 13th and June 27th, as well as payrolls and bills and more bills and more bills.
That's what we do in the summer.
Can you pay my bills? Okay, can I have a motion? I'll make a motion.
I'll second. I have Mr. Medina on the second. Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder.
Aye.
Mrs. Birkin. Aye. Mrs. Grove.
Aye.
And Mrs. Levesque.
Aye. 4.0 superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. Again, I always joke that I'm always glad when the principals get to take July off, but I do have to hold like all of my questions and my emails to them, so they get a nice long list when they come back. So I'm always very appreciative when they come back, so we can really get moving on some things. But it's been a great start already to August, and we can't believe that kids are going to be coming very, very soon. And we're excited. If we want, after the meeting tonight, we can look kind of around this building, see how construction's progressing, and again, very excited to be having the kids in no time. As far as the PTA report, don't really have a lot of news right now. I think we have some people on vacation. I did reach out, and I know we usually do the bingo event as our first big event. We usually have a meeting before that, but usually at the end of September on that Friday is our first PTA event. But we're just kind of waiting to get those official dates. Vacant positions and possible staffing needs. Unfortunately, just like talking to a lot of other superintendents around the area, we are still trying to fill positions. Our main ones right now that we are looking at are some special ed teachers at the junior high. I do have an interview with a math teacher tomorrow morning for that position. We are hopeful that we just filled our EL position over there. We also had some later music over at Ridge Lawn that we were not necessarily expecting that needs to be filled. And then paraprofessionals is also an area that we are looking at. So we are not fully staffed. We still have some good interviews lined up. But again, that's an issue we're seeing across the entire district. We had something sent to all superintendents last week that said 79% of districts across the state right now are not fully staffed for this upcoming school year. And the high schools, many of them are starting next week. And 94% of superintendents said the hiring is as bad, if not worse than last year in terms of candidates. It seems like at the elementary level, we're still finding, like if you're a third or fourth grade teacher, there's still those candidates, but it's when it's those specialized positions that they need a certificate for that we're really seeing some issues. So we continue to try to get it out there, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's our administrators going to job fairs, and just in all honesty, the biggest thing is just in talking with people and using our connections to say like, hey, this is what we're looking for. And whether people know a family member or a family friend or other schools are like, well, we interviewed this candidate, they might be okay for your district. They may not have been the best fit. And so we found some that way as well. But it's something we'll continue to work on, and we'll kind of see where we are in another week or so. So, and then open houses, open house comes really quick. We have Monday, August 21st from 6:30 to 8 here at Finley. And on Tuesday, August 22nd from 6:30 to 8. Later on in the meeting, I'll be recommending that we start the board meeting that Tuesday at 6 o'clock because it's currently scheduled for 6:30. We try to keep that a little bit shorter of a meeting so that we can get to the open houses. And I encourage you, even if you do not have a child in one of the specific schools, if you can make it that night, just to walk around. It's always good to be in those buildings and see the teachers and the parents as a board member if you can make it. So
Is that when the students can bring in their school supplies?
yes, that's when they bring it all, and it's crazy and fun, and it's finally nice to hear the buildings loud, not with construction noise, but with kids and families. So. And then that same 2 days, we have our opening staff institute days. On that Monday is when I get to address the entire staff, which I look forward to actually all summer. I've been finishing up the PowerPoints and putting in the pictures that I want. And so it's just a great way to kick it off. And what I'm excited about this year is Megan and Carrie and Caroline have really been working on PD that gives teachers options. There are some that people go to the entire thing. One of the things that they'll be going to is team teaching throughout the day with Lisa Herod, who many of you had met last year. So there are some that the entire staff is going to get, but there are a lot more choices so that they can go to ones that they feel that they would benefit the most from. So that's a big change for us. It's really, before it was mostly a one size fits all, but they've worked really hard to make sure we're given those options. And then on Wednesday, there's an optional paid day for those staff members who are going to be team teaching to come in and work with those team teachers. And that's the first time we've done that. I really like it in our calendar that we've always had that Wednesday is kind of a day where if teachers need to come in and get stuff done, they can. If they need a day to just be at home and do whatever they need to do, they have that option. So I hope that we can keep that in the calendar for a long time. And then 4.5 is our e-learning plan. 3 years ago, I can't believe it's already been that long. But we put in an e-learning plan that had nothing to do with COVID, but making sure that when we have emergency days, that the kids would have the opportunity to work from home. I feel like it's worked pretty well for our district as a balance between for our families and our kids as well as our staff. Because if you remember those days, you find out sometimes at 8 or 9 o'clock the night before. And I don't think it's fair to have staff members who are at home with their own families to have to be live at all times. It's a little bit different than when we had like e-learning during COVID. These are things that just get dropped at the very end. I try really hard not to take advantage that these are days that we have built in where they're 5 days, because it's much easier to call that day and say than it is to, well, we don't have any school, we have to make it up on Mondays and Tuesdays in the summer. But try really hard to not take advantage of it. But it is a nice option to have. And again, we'll have the hearing, which is required by the law. It had to be printed in the newspaper, which it was the last week of July that we're having the hearing tonight. And then it would be good for 3 years if it's approved. So any questions on the e-learning plan? All right. And then my last one is board training. We've had Bob Madonia, who, if you did anything with our strategic plan, he has done our strategic plan now. I think he's been with us for like 7 years that he's done this. Dr. Madonia has also come out and done board training, which has been really well received. And we did it my first year when I was here. But now we have a completely different board that I would love to bring on and do that training again. Our September date when we would normally do the study session, I will be in Springfield for the superintendent's conference. I know I've gotten a few of your dates that you're available. So if you have not gotten those to me, if you could either send them to me tonight or just let me know so we can kind of plan with him on when we can host that meeting. And then just as a reminder, Lori signed up all of our new board members for the required online training. I know at least one who has completely done. But if you did not get the email from IASB, please let us know and we'll make sure that we get that because that is state required training. That's all I've got at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Megan for the curriculum report.
Great. So 5.1 summer school recap. We ended summer school on Thursday, July 20th. And very thankful for the staff of teachers and also administrators who worked summer school this year. We originally had 165 students register for summer school. And unfortunately, due to families who, even before summer school started, they pulled their kids or they had made summer travel plans. We ended summer school with 129 students. We had 39 students that were no longer enrolled by the end of the program. And so we definitely, Dr. Thorns and I, and even the teachers that were summer school teachers have been talking, collecting feedback and data about, what changes do we need to make? What are we doing and how can we ensure that what we're doing is the most successful and most impactful over the summer? And some of that data does come from our attendance. And what we have noticed over the years is that the attendance does tend to go down significantly after the 4th of July. The day after 4th of July this year, our attendance was only at 50%. We had a lot of families that were called, said that they had slept in, they had a late night over the course of the 4th of July, and they were not sending their child. We also, the celebration of Eid fell in during our summer school, and on that day, we only had 42% of students attend. And then the last week of summer school, we only had 68% attendance. So that's definitely something we want to consider when we're staffing these rooms, when we're looking at enrollment. What can we do to be most effective? So we'll be revisiting that and then also talking to the board in November. And as we are, it's really early, but that's when we really start the planning for next summer. 5.2 professional development. We are extremely excited about the professional development plan. Caroline Perry, Dr. Thorns, and I started this planning back in January and brought the administrators on board, in discussing about, our future this year, next year, things like that. And what are those things that through our theme of golden opportunities, can we ensure that we are following through with and aligning to what our future is. And so we will be partnering again this year with Casper. It's a group outside organization from the University of Illinois Chicago that has been working with our district math leadership team. for the last several years. They worked with our admin team last year, and now we're gonna bring those two groups together and work on goals and how the teacher leaders can help support what the admin is doing and working with towards like making our practice public and building effective teacher teams. And really kind of bringing that work to the buildings and then to the teachers in classrooms and things like that. So we're excited about that. We also have professional development in the areas of executive functioning, which is huge. We also are going to be bringing someone out to talk about the importance of culture and cultural awareness in our teaching practices and strategies in our buildings, in our vocab and our beliefs and our values. And then also on mental health, and that organization will be surveying our staff and then planning their professional development based on that survey of what our staff needs in order to, come prepared as, humans to school on a regular basis, make sure that they're ready and successful so that our kids can get the best also. We're happy to partner with Alex McNeese. That was actually the meeting that we spent today together happily with Alex. Alex came out in one of last year's institutes and worked with the staff on transforming school culture. We're continuing that work and now going through another book study of a book that he is very passionate about called Time for Change. And he'll be working with our administrators and school improvement teams and goals to ensure that we are focusing on the goals that we have as a district and as an administrative team and seeing that success with solution focused, forward ideas. And then we have a bunch of small professional developments. We have foundations on next Tuesday. Like Dr. Thorne said, we have our team teaching day. We're going to do some small group training. We've got a lot of things in these variety menu options that we're going to provide our teachers and staff throughout the year. So we're really excited that we are in the position we are now and can look ahead to see what we have to offer and plan on and have a good plan for the year already. And lastly, one of the things that we're very excited about is this opportunity for the first time ever that we're offering a 2-day new teacher orientation. In the past, historically, we've only offered 1 day. So this will really give us an opportunity on day one to train our staff with curriculum instruction, EL programming, special ed programming, bring them in. We've got a big theme of teamwork and sports themes. So we're going to surround it by the energy. And then day two will be really the district overview, getting them into their buildings, doing a tour with the staff and meeting their mentors. So it allows us to really go deeper with those staff before the school year starts. In the past, we've spread that out throughout the year during their Monday mentor meetings. And sometimes they weren't talking about certain things until November, December, January, and it might not have been as effective for them. So that's really exciting. And then 5.3, Freckle by Renaissance. So you might remember this time last year, I had recommended the board purchase Freckle. Freckle is a resource, online educational resource that is provided for our K-8 students. And it's leveled and it's a game-based approach that allows students to engage in both ELA, math, science, and social studies lessons. The students were using it last year. They're very familiar with it. Your children probably experienced it, if not at home in school. But there's options for printable resources, and teachers can look at data to really, get a better understanding of where their students are. So this year, this past year, when looking at the data, a lot of our teachers have the students engage in ELA and math in Freckle. And so the data for science and social studies usage was very low. And it's something that, after reviewing that research or that usage, that I would like to recommend this purchase again for next year or for this coming year, but just for ELA and math. And I think that really will allow us when we're doing hosting small group instruction at the junior high in ELA and math and at the elementaries during our center times, allowing that to be an option for the students to be engaging in while the teacher is pulling small groups that would be focused and level towards that student's learning level. So I am recommending that the district purchase Freckle just for ELA and math. We did get the updated quote, but in the agenda, it is still listed as the full blown quote for ELA, math, science, and social studies, so I'm asking the board not to exceed that amount because,
And we'll actually change that into the 25,495.
okay, great. So, yeah, so it is that, and I feel that we will be using that resource more with just those two subjects, and it would be a really great resource for our teachers to have to support that engagement when they're working in small group instruction. And 5.4, I do not have any other, but I know I'm also available for questions. Yes.
Did the science and social studies teachers agree that Freckle was a waste of time and?
They don't
energy?
have the time within their 42-minute at the junior high. And at the elementary, the limited time that we have for science and social studies right now, we vary when science and social studies is taught because it's such a small increment of time. That it's not, it would be taking away from that instructional time to try to get that involved. When looking at it, we had one grade level at the elementary that had science and social studies lessons.
Okay,
So-
and then my last question is, who was the outside organization that you brought in? For the mental health piece to your staff?
So that is going to be, it's out of Oak Brook. It's actually the presenter, and I don't know the name off the top. We've met with them 3 times as individuals. Her name is Brua, and she actually lives here in Chicago Ridge,
Oh,
but she works in Oak Brook. So she lives like 3 blocks down.
can you get me that information?
I can absolutely, yeah.
Any other questions?
With the Freckle, is it purchased like ELA and math, or I just wondering if there's any overlap with the Dreambox and then the Freckle?
Yep, so it is EL, it can be purchased separately. The junior high uses Freckle preferably, and then Dreambox is more of a choice. And at the elementary, it's Freckle for ELA and Dreambox for math, but then Freckle data did show that those students were at the elementary also using Freckle as an option. But it
Will
can
they
be,
use Dreambox more now that that's an option as well?
I'm sorry.
Do you think they'll use Dreambox more now that that's an option as well, or in the elementary level?
Do I think the elementary will use Dreambox more? I think they will use Dreambox for math and Freckle for ELA and math.
Oh.
Yeah. I understand your question,
Okay,
but they're using it.
both,
Mhm,
okay.
mhm. Yeah, I think Dreambox was used heavily at home by kids because it tends to be more, yeah, and engaging in that sense. But there are teachers who in their small group are giving that as a practice activity for the students for math as well.
Any other questions? Okay, we're gonna turn it over to Kathy.
Okay, thank you. 6.1, at your places, you will see the FY24 tentative budget. And we are currently projecting an increase in fund balance of roughly $67,000 before capital projects. When we consider the outflow of cash for the capital projects, we're looking at ending next year at about a $3.3 million lower fund balance in total. That will be coming from the Ed Fund. And it sounds like a lot of money, $3.3 million, but what we have to remember is the renovations and additions for this summer were almost $9 million. So at the end of next year, if we only decrease $3.3 million, that is fabulous news. And the reason is because of our one large grant we got from the federal government from COVID. So we're looking at roughly right now of about a $28 million fund balance at the end of next year. We will use the next 4 weeks to kind of fine tune our budget. We will have new staff coming on and we can fine tune those salary expenses along with all the grants actually aren't in there already. They haven't been published for us to write them. So what we've done right now is we've put a placeholder for the revenue and expenses in the shell, but we will allocate those accordingly over the next few weeks. Construction update. In your board packet, you'll see the detailed summary, which shows every building and what's going on, but really in a nutshell, we're getting there. You had the opportunity in June to look at Ridge Lawn, which is just fabulous. I was scrolling through my phone a couple nights ago when I was wide awake, and I had pictures from when it was just concrete. And now it's walls. It's just so exciting. So I hope you do take Dr. Thorne's on, his offer to bring you to Ridge Central and Finley to show you the progress. And the expected substantial completion date is a week from Monday. And that is the date that the architect and the construction company is telling us those rooms are ours to do what we please. But now keep in mind, substantial completion versus we're done are two different dates. So even though students will be in the building 16 days later, we do anticipate some final repairs, final maintenance in those classrooms. But right now, we're all extremely hopeful that those students can get in there on the first day of the year. And then another thing, it's kind of strange, but we're already talking about what we're going to do the summer of next year, if you can believe it. While the building principals were out for July, I did have a chance to sit down with our architect studio GC to look at our facility and refresh for next summer already. So now that the building principals are back, hopefully in September, once they're back into the thick of things, we will again meet with the architect and go over as a finance and buildings team as part of the strategic management project to see what we want to do next year. Because ideally, we like to get those bids out to the public November, December, the latest, because it just gives more opportunity for some competitive pricing. And then 6.3, my last item, Cook County property tax delays. They're here again. Last year was the first year that we experienced it. Property tax bills usually go out in August and are due in September. This year, they're projecting the bills to go out to homeowners November 1st with the due date of December 1st. Once again, Cook County's kind of playing the COVID card. They're still saying it has COVID implications, along with an overhaul of their technology system. Basically, we're going to be late in getting our money, but fortunately, we do have adequate fund balances to hold us over those extra couple of months where that money would have come in September, and it won't be here till December. So really not anticipating any problems there. Any questions on any of that? Okay, thank you.
No, old business.
Nothing.
All right, 8.0, new business. 8.1 is a public hearing on e-learning. I'm opening the hearing at 7 p.m. Is there anyone who would like to address the board regarding the e-learning plan for District 127.5? I ask again, is there anyone who would like to address the board regarding the e-learning plan for District 127.5? Final request, is there anyone who would like to address the board regarding the e-learning plan for District 127.5? 7:01. The hearing has closed. Okay. 8.2, potential board action to approve the district e-learning plan. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Birkin,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder.
Aye.
And Mrs. Levinsky.
Aye. 8.3, potential board action to approve the display of the fiscal year 24 tentative budget. Can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Mrs. Schroeder on the second. Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Birkin,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
and Mrs. Levinsky.
Aye. 8.4, a potential board action to approve school improvement plan. Can I have a motion? I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.5, potential board action to approve the hiring of one full-time teacher. Can I have a motion? I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.6, potential board action to approve payment to Helm Mechanical in the amount of $36,394.71 for work done replacing the rooftop units. Can I have a motion? I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.7, potential board action to approve payment to Red Feather Group in the amount of $122,606.38 for window and door replacement. Can I have a motion? I'll second.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.8, potential board action to approve payment to Construction Solutions of Illinois in the amount of $839,863.97 for building additions and renovation work done at Ridge Lawn. Can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.9, potential board action to approve payment to Construction Solutions of Illinois in the amount of $1.2 million for building additions and renovation work done at Ridge Central and Finley. Can I have a motion?
I'll second.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.10, potential board action to approve the purchase of classroom furniture for Finley from Interiors for Business in the amount of $38,440.35. Can I have a motion? I'll make a motion. Okay, I was gonna ask you that.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye.
And for 8.11, potential board action to approve an online subscription for Freckle. We'd like to change that amount and get a motion for $25,495.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.12, potential board action to approve payment to Honeywell International in the amount of $63,168 for mechanical and electrical maintenance. I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.13, potential board action to approve payment to Studio GC in the amount of $26,269.59 for fees related to building additions and renovations. Can I have a motion? I'll second.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.14, potential board action to change the August 22nd, 2023 study session to a special meeting with a start time of 6 p.m. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mrs. Bergen,
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mr. Medina,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebuzik.
Aye. 8.15, other, any others? 9.0, meeting reports. 10.0, informational.
Nothing.
11.0, opportunity for visitors to speak. Anybody like to say something? Okay. 12.0, president's prerogative. Okay, well,
You don't have to have anything.
welcome back, administrators. I'm sure we're all excited to have the kiddos in. I guess, can I ask a question here?
Yes.
When are the schedules coming out?
Are you talking like when the teacher, like who the teachers are?
Yeah,
For the kids, they'll be sent out Monday right after school in the mail.
right on.
No other questions?
No other questions, comments? 3.0 adjournment to closed session.
Yes, for the purpose of the discussion of appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with the Open Meetings Act as defined in the Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1. Discussion of collective negotiating matters between the public body, its employees or representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employee as defined in Section 2C2. The discussion of litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administration tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered in the minutes of the closed meeting as defined in Section 2C11. And the discussion of minutes of prior meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act as defined in Section 2C21 for the purpose of review, approval, or release of such minutes. We will not be discussing security or student discipline issues during this closed session.
Great, can we have a motion? I'll make a motion.
A second.
Mrs. Grove,
Aye.
Mr. Medina.
Aye.
Mrs. Schroeder.
Aye.
Mrs. Birkin,
Aye.
Mrs. Lebudzic,
Aye.
7:08 PM.